The creatinine is down to about 1 to 3, and the kidney was saved using this drug. It was very dramatic. This is the fluorescence, nothing for IgM, nothing for IgG, nothing for C3, and nothing for C4d except what you would expect in a glomerulus. We use this in monitoring desensitization. This is a 44-year-old white female, gravida-4, para-4, no transfusions, ESRD of undetermined origin. She had 45 class 1 antibodies, no class 2. We did a preemptive living donor with a patient that had an A24, which she had antibodies against. The peak was 9,000 MFIs at 6 months previously. After desensitization with bortezomib, apheresis, IVIG, and rituximab, it brought it down to 5.7. Yes?
Do you want to say what the different drugs are directed against?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Do you want to say what the different drugs are directed against?
Okay. Rituximab shuts down B cells. Bortezomib, or Velcade, is a proteasome inhibitor and works on rapidly dividing cells. Plasma cells is its target. It was first used in multiple myeloma patients with some degree of success, and has just recently become an investigational drug in use in kidney transplants. The people that have done the most work with it are Steve Woodle's group at the University of Cincinnati and Matthew Everly, the PharmD that was there, and he's now with One Land. Apheresis, I'm sure you know what that is. And if anybody has a handle on exactly what IVIG or CMV-GAM does mechanistically, please let me know. I'd like to learn. But it does work. It helps shut down the immune system. But this is a cocktail that is a recipe for opportunistic infection. So you have to really be monitoring these patients for infection very, very scrupulously, and particularly BK virus, because you've lowered the actual T cell response way low in these patients with some of the other drugs that you're going to be using. For the final cross-match serum, 5.7 kMFI, and they elected the transplant. This is just following her entire profile of antibodies. From her peak serum at 10/25/08, she had 26 antibodies in the strong range, including the donor-specific A24. At 1 to 8, it became weak. At 1 to 4, at the cross-match serum, or the current serum at 11/25/09, the strength had dropped down to a moderate and still very weak, and that's why they elected to transplant this, because it had dropped that much. Immediately post-transplant, no DSAs were detected, and that's scary because you think that the kidney has sopped up all of the antibody that's there. Post-transplant, her September 2010 serum, no DSAs were still detected. There is no evidence of rejection, and this just goes to show you the declension of the A24 during that period of time. And this is the time of transplant right here, where it was about 5.7. It kept going down and then disappeared finally around January, and it's biopsy negative. We've done 107 patients this way. CPRA has ranged from 4 to 100%. Group A is 55 patients, 14 with a prozone. Group A 52 with a 0 prozone, and a variety of immune protocols to desensitize these patients. Group A, that was the ones with the high antibodies and prozones. The patient we thought had a de novo IgM response. It turned out to be that actually the donor, which was his wife, had IgM nephropathy that was unrecognized, and it was exacerbated once the graft was in the host. And the patient had a DQ7 DSA 16,500 at 1 to 32. Immunofluorescence was small and focal. The DSA is still 3,800, and the creatinine is 1. And similar results with the group 2 group. So these highly sensitized patients that probably would not have been transplanted and would have either died on the waiting list or had a very bad outcome with badly matched kidneys, because we do not match in the States. The prevailing medical opinion is we can cut it out, plant it, and blast it with immunosuppression, and that'll do it. And it's probably a very naive approach, but nonetheless, that's it. Well, in summary, high-titer antibodies do prozone with single antigen beads. If you control the technique, it's highly reproducible. High titers change slowly over time unless the patient is desensitized. High-titer antibodies are not affected by a single dilution. And if you normalize the single antigen bead results with your flow cross-match, use the same controls, positive and negative, independently of what's built in with the beads. You can develop a clinical threshold with your flow cross-matches, and this may give you a better way of managing your patients using a number that unfortunately our clinical colleagues are using the MFI number or the fluorescent index number as a discrete number like a phosphorus or a glucose or some chemistry test, and it's not meant to be that. It's a relative measure of strength. It's not an answer, because we can't all get the same answer if we do the test independently but in parallel. And until we're capable of doing that, it's a number that you have to tame in order to make it relevant to your transplant program. And I'll stop here and take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff, for an excellent overview of the situation in the United States, of course. Because what you mentioned, in the United States they don't do any matching, and in Europe we try to match as good as possible. And also we hardly do desensitization in Europe. In Europe we think if a patient has antibodies to a donor, we don't do the transplant, we find another donor. So it's a completely different approach.
It is, and I think we need to learn from you all, and I think we're beginning to, because we're really looking into paired donations or chain donations where at least in living donors we can control the outcome and find better matches and better virtual cross matches to set donors and recipients up. The problem still for us is deceased donors. And the drive is to transplant, not to use the science that's been so eloquently given here to back up the decisions that are being made clinically.
Are there any questions? Yeah?
I just wanted to comment on another aspect of UC and...
Wait a moment. Sorry.
Don't kill yourself.
I guess not only immunologically makes, at least in Europe, I think more sense to try to look for better matched donors, but I think the cost of monitoring the sensitization is quite high, and I think it adds a significant amount of money to the transplant procedure itself, because I understand you need to do a lot of monitoring following each apheresis or each immunoabsorption or whatever method is being used, and I think that's been another deterrent as well.
This is true, and I think this is a lesson that is going to come back from the third-party carriers, the insurance companies and the government insurance company, and they're going to say, you're going to have to put a stop to this. An apheresis protocol, for instance, could run you as high as $50,000 to run a course in order to get a patient desensitized enough. Some of these patients, if you look at the Hopkins data, they've gone out to 32 apheresis. That's just... My administrator would be in my office with a shotgun, all right? And the business side is eventually going to, I think, bring reason to this. But you're right, Christina, that's a very, very real problem with the desensitization approach. And when we have the tools to match either at the genotypic or the epitopic level or a combination of both, why in the world don't we use it?
We need more donors.
Amen. We need more donors. All right.
Everybody needs more donors. Can I ask you, do you use the Luminex cross-match in routine, or have you tested the Luminex cross match?
We've not tried that yet. We're in the process of getting Jar Hal to teach us how to do that, and when we do, we're going to look at that. We tried the early on the Tepnell version of it, or what are they now, GenPro? I wasn't too satisfied with the results that I got there, and I'm looking to see what One Lambda has to offer.
Yes, and another question. Do you use DDT treatment when you, in your patient for single antigen beat for the sera?
Another good question. There's been a lot of evidence in the literature that IgM aggregates, for want of a better term, influence the control results, either positive or negative, with the single antigen beads. Johns Hopkins group has used diffusible membranes. Other centers have used DTT, dithiopyritol. Some have used heat shock in order to break these complexes apart. We've tried all three of them, and they're no better than actually using the adsorbed beads that are provided by One Lambda, and that's the route we chose to go, is to use that. Marcello.
Isn't it that some of your prozone effect may be IgM?
We looked at that, and it didn't seem to pan out, at least for us. This looked to be a straight idiotype. Okay. Campbell?
It's just one of my pet hobby horses. I'm not sure. I wonder whether we need to speculate about anything mysterious about IVIG. I feel the null hypothesis should be that we are increasing the total serum IgG concentration so much, we're going to increase the catabolic rate. So we're just basically diluting and turning over the endogenous produced antibodies, I think. At least that should be the null hypothesis.
It would be a feedback. A negative feedback to the B cell.
To total, no.
To total your IgG.
And here you have the argument right here.
If we find something that can't be explained by that null hypothesis, then we have to worry about something mysterious.
Yeah, it's
No. But I think if we start to discuss this, we can discuss the whole morning.
We'll lose the break.
At least 5 different mechanisms for which there is proof.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for your presentation. I would like to ask you what could be said about the early and late graft functions of sensitized patients, the desensitized patients. I'm sorry.
Define. It's a good question. What would you? Let's see if I can phrase it right. How would you describe the early and late function of kidneys in desensitized patients? Is that correct? Okay. What do you define by late? We have patients that are now 3 years out using some sort of desensitization, and the vast majority of them are still holding fast with their creatinine. We've had, I think, 2 in the test group that I showed up there of 107 patients that had problems and had what I would even consider a rebound effect. But for the most part, we haven't seen anything at 2 to 3 years.
So the graft